You wake up every day with that feeling. It's subtle at first, but it's there. A quiet pressure, always nudging you, never quite letting go. You know the feeling, don't you? That gentle urge to get up, to move, to do something, to prove something, to make sure you're achieving, progressing, becoming. Even when there's no one watching, you can feel it, this persistent pull. It doesn't shout, but it guides you. And in some quiet corner of your mind, you may even wonder, what if I could let go of this pull? What would happen if I just stopped for a while? This is self-discipline. And you've lived with it for as long as you can remember, quietly shaping the way you move through the world. But what if it's more than just a simple act of doing something you know you should do? What if it's a deep, internal force rooted in your earliest experiences? Let's walk through it slowly. Let's find out. Self-discipline. It's a word that carries a heavy weight in today's world. We hear it constantly, you need more self-discipline. Just push yourself a little harder. It sounds almost like an instruction, a command. And yet, when you break it down, self-discipline is not just about external actions. It's about how you hold yourself internally. At its surface, self-discipline seems straightforward, doesn't it? It's the ability to act in accordance with what you believe is the right course of action, regardless of emotional impulses. It's about doing the work, even when you don't feel like it. But it's not as simple as that. Self-discipline, at its core, is a psychological process. It is the way you regulate your emotions, your desires, and your actions to achieve long-term goals. It's not about the momentary victory of pushing through a task. It's about learning to navigate the subtle terrain between short-term comfort and long-term benefit. But the real question is, why is it so hard? Why does it feel so exhausting at times? Why is it that no matter how much self-discipline you summon, there's always a part of you that craves release? To understand that, we need to look at self-discipline through a deeper lens. Self-discipline is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, it's essential in many aspects of life. It's what drives you to reach goals, to overcome obstacles, to find success. But as with anything, when it becomes too ingrained or too rigid, it starts to define you. It starts to feel like a cage, keeping you trapped in a cycle of doing and achieving, but never truly being. It's the part of you that pushes, but doesn't know how to stop. Think back to your childhood. There was a time when self-discipline wasn't something you consciously chose. It was something that just appeared. It may have started with something as simple as cleaning up your room or finishing a task because you were told it was the right thing to do. You didn't think about the long-term benefits then. You didn't think about self-control as a choice. You just did what you needed to do to avoid discomfort, to receive approval, to feel seen. This is where self-discipline begins to take root. It's important to understand that in the beginning, self-discipline wasn't about achievement or success. It was a response to emotional needs, a response to the need for security, love, and validation. When you were younger, your self-discipline wasn't driven by the pursuit of goals in the way it is now. Instead, it was driven by the need to feel safe in an environment that often felt unpredictable. You learned early on that by doing things a certain way, by being good and following rules, you could avoid rejection, disappointment, or punishment. And this is where self-discipline starts to take on its more complex form. It's no longer just about tasks. It's about emotional regulation. Without realizing it, your mind began to associate control with safety. The more you could control your actions and your environment, the more you could avoid discomfort and remain safe. This is a fundamental psychological adaptation that all humans have in different forms. It's a survival instinct. What you didn't know then is that self-discipline wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was also about not letting anything slip. Because in your early experiences, anything that slipped could result in disappointment. The result could be rejection or isolation. And in childhood, being rejected could feel like a matter of emotional survival. So, self-discipline became your way of staying in control, your way of making sure that you wouldn't fall short, your way of ensuring that nothing could harm you emotionally. The interesting part is that this kind of discipline wasn't learned in a vacuum. It was a reaction to the environment. You learned that to be accepted, loved, or safe, you needed to be disciplined, and this became a part of your identity. It wasn't just about tasks, It was about who you were. The first layer of self-discipline, then, wasn't about getting things done for external rewards, but about managing the emotional chaos that came with being human, with feeling vulnerable, unsure, and exposed. And as you grew older, this emotional regulation became embedded within your behavior patterns. Part 2. The origins of self-discipline, childhood and early experiences. When we try to understand self-discipline, it's essential to return to the earliest moments of our lives. As children, we didn't have the concepts of motivation, willpower, or even success. What we had were instincts, feelings, and subtle cues from the adults around us. We learned to read spaces, to anticipate moods, to adapt ourselves in ways that often went unnoticed. And this is where self-discipline quietly began to grow. Perhaps you remember moments that seemed ordinary at the time, a chore left undone, a look of disappointment in a parent's eyes, or the silence that followed when your needs weren't met. These moments carry weight, far heavier than they appear. Without realizing it, you began to adjust. You learned which behaviors kept you safe. You discovered which actions earned approval. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, a pattern emerged. If you could control yourself, you could navigate the uncertainty of the world. This is how a child disappears. Not in dramatic ways, not in an obvious collapse of identity, but in the small, quiet modifications of self. You learn to shrink parts of yourself, to quiet certain desires, to hide emotions that might be too intense or inconvenient. You become attuned to the expectations of others and, in the process, lose touch with some of your own. The child that needed to be seen, loved, or comforted, quietly fades under the weight of adapting to survive. There's a term psychologists use, parentification. It describes a situation where a child takes on responsibilities beyond their age, acting as caretaker, emotional buffer, or problem solver for adults. But this doesn't have to happen in extreme cases. Even subtle forms, being the child who always keeps calm so no one gets upset, or the one who performs to avoid disappointment, are forms of parentification. And these early adaptations are the roots of what later becomes self-discipline. What's remarkable, though, is that these adaptations are intelligent. They are not signs of weakness, failure, or flaw. You learned to survive. You learned to navigate a world that sometimes felt unpredictable or unsafe. Not because you were weak, but because you were human. Think of a small child quietly observing the tension around them. They notice how quickly emotions escalate, or how fragile relationships can be. They realize that their actions have an effect. They can soothe, prevent, or delay discomfort. Over time, the child begins to internalize this responsibility. They control themselves in ways that adults may never see, in ways that keep the household or the immediate environment functioning. And in doing so, they develop a keen sense of self-discipline, even if they have no words for it. These early experiences shape the architecture of the nervous system. A child who feels that calm, order, and predictability are scarce will unconsciously learn to create those conditions for themselves. Every act of control becomes a small safety mechanism, reinforcing the belief that survival depends on effort, attention, and vigilance. The child may never realize they are being disciplined. They simply do what is necessary to keep the world from falling apart. And as the years pass, this adaptive mechanism becomes more than habit. It becomes identity. You grow into the person who can handle difficulties without complaint, who pushes through challenges without pause, who holds themselves to high standards. In adulthood, it looks like resilience, responsibility, or ambition. But underneath, there is also a trace of that child, the one who needed to be vigilant to feel safe. It's worth pausing to notice the emotional texture of this experience. There is pride, yes, but also quiet exhaustion. There is competence, but also a subtle sense of pressure that never quite leaves. You've carried the expectation of control from childhood into adulthood. Your self-discipline became the lens through which you measure your worth, even though its original purpose was survival, not achievement. And here's the paradox. What saved you then, your ability to anticipate, adapt, and control, can now feel like a form of confinement. The strategies that once brought safety may now be driving relentless striving, unspoken guilt, and the inability to rest. Your self-discipline has grown so habitual that you may no longer realize how much of it is automatic, how much is still responding to the world you experienced as a child, rather than the world you inhabit now. Yet, in recognizing this, there is also freedom. Seeing the origins of self-discipline in your early life allows you to soften your judgment toward yourself. It allows you to acknowledge that your coping strategies were intelligent, necessary, and human. And when you can witness these patterns without shame, you create a space to begin exploring how they serve you now, and where they might limit you. The roots of self-discipline are entwined with survival, attachment, and early adaptation. But as you mature, the opportunity emerges to understand these patterns consciously, to notice the ways in which they influence your choices, your stress, and even your relationships. And it is in this awareness that the next layer of self-discipline begins to reveal itself, not just as a mechanism of survival, but as a force that shapes your entire inner world. Part 3. The psychological mechanisms behind self-discipline. As you move through life, you begin to notice patterns. The ways you push yourself, the quiet pressure that always seems present, the subtle insistence that you must achieve, must perform, must not fail, these are not random. They are deeply rooted in psychological and physiological mechanisms that began forming long before you understood what self-discipline meant. Think of self-discipline not just as effort or willpower, but as a system your mind and body developed to regulate uncertainty. When you were young, the world often felt unpredictable, and your nervous system learned a simple rule: control what you can, anticipate what you cannot, and you will stay safe. This rule became a blueprint, guiding your responses to both external challenges and internal impulses. Every act of discipline is, in a sense, a rehearsal of that blueprint, a way of telling your body, I am safe, I am capable, I can handle this. At the heart of this process is something psychologists call hypervigilance. It's a heightened state of awareness and readiness, a nervous system on alert. Hypervigilance is not inherently harmful. It evolved as a survival mechanism. But when it becomes a constant state, it quietly shapes your relationship with the world. You begin to anticipate problems before they appear, to monitor your environment and your own behavior endlessly. You may feel restless even when there is no actual danger, because your body is wired to respond as though there is. And hypervigilance is not just mental, it is embodied. Your muscles are slightly tense. Your heart rate is subtly elevated. Your breath is quick, shallow, or irregular without conscious effort. Your body is always prepared to act, to prevent or solve, to respond. This is why self-discipline can feel exhausting. It is not simply a choice you make. It is the physical manifestation of a nervous system that has been trained to anticipate threat and reward simultaneously. This physiological backdrop explains why stopping is difficult. When you attempt rest, your body may resist. Stillness may feel like risk, because your nervous system has learned that inactivity could invite failure, disappointment, or rejection. Even moments of pleasure or leisure can be tinged with anxiety. You may notice your mind filling with tasks, obligations, or worries, even when there is nothing immediately pressing. Self-discipline is, at this stage, as much about avoiding discomfort as it is about accomplishing goals. It is here that self-discipline intersects with deeper psychological constructs. Think about attachment styles and early emotional experiences. A child who learned that love, attention, or approval was conditional may develop an anxious or avoidant attachment pattern. In adulthood, these attachment styles manifest as a need to control, to overperform, to anticipate the expectations of others. Self-discipline becomes not just a way to succeed, but a way to secure connection. You work, perform, and achieve, often unconsciously, as a means of ensuring safety and acceptance. And yet, self-discipline is not inherently a burden. In fact, it is brilliantly adaptive. It allows you to navigate complex social and emotional landscapes, to manage responsibilities, and to achieve goals that require sustained effort. The problem arises when these strategies are unexamined. When the mechanisms that once protected you now become automatic, relentless, and disconnected from your actual needs. When the nervous system continues to treat ordinary situations as though survival is at stake. Without realizing it, your self-discipline can become a double-edged sword. The very strategies that once kept you safe, anticipating problems, regulating impulses, pushing through discomfort, can now lead to chronic tension, subtle anxiety, and an inability to rest. You might find yourself constantly striving, rarely satisfied, always aware of what remains undone. The child who needed control to survive now resides in the adult who cannot allow herself to simply be. And here lies the paradox. What once was protection can now feel like confinement. The same mechanisms that helped you navigate a challenging childhood can, if left unchecked, dominate your adult life. Your drive, efficiency, and reliability remain impressive, yet there is a quiet cost. Self-discipline, when unexamined, carries an invisible weight, the weight of hypervigilance, conditioned fear, and unconscious survival strategies. It is also worth acknowledging the emotional texture of this experience. There is pride in your ability to push through, to meet obligations, to perform reliably. But alongside that pride is often a quiet weariness, a sense of always needing to do more, of never fully being able to relax. And this weariness is not a moral failing. It is simply the echo of early adaptations, carried forward as habits, shaping your mind, your body, and your sense of self. Self-discipline, in its essence, is a tool. It can be used wisely and consciously, or it can operate unconsciously, shaping every aspect of your behavior. Understanding the mechanisms behind it, both psychological and physiological, allows you to step back, observe yourself, and recognize that your patterns of striving are deeply human. They are intelligent, adaptive, and, most importantly, survivable. Recognizing this does not remove responsibility or diminish achievement. It simply allows space for reflection. For the first time, you might notice that self-discipline is not the entirety of who you are. It is not the measure of your worth. It is not the only way to stay safe, to be loved, or to feel competent. It is a tool that you can understand, honor, and use without letting it dominate you. And as you begin to see it this way, the quiet pressure eases slightly. You notice the space between effort and rest. You begin to realize that the nervous system's learned patterns do not have to define your choices today. And in that realization, there is a subtle, almost imperceptible release, a momentary awareness that you can be both disciplined and at ease, both vigilant and calm, both human and enough. Part 4. When self-discipline becomes a cage. There comes a point when the very thing that once protected you begins to feel constraining. The strategies that allowed you to navigate a chaotic childhood, the vigilance that kept you prepared, the self-control that ensured you were accepted, they start to show another face. They become a cage. You may not notice it at first. Life keeps moving, obligations continue, achievements accumulate, and the quiet pressure remains. It feels normal. You feel competent, responsible, and in control. But underneath the surface, there is a subtle tension, a sense that you can never fully relax, that there is always one more thing to do, one more way to prove yourself. This is the paradox of self-discipline. What once saved you now confines you. Consider for a moment the emotional texture of this experience. The pride in being capable is real. The satisfaction of completing tasks, meeting expectations, and fulfilling responsibilities is undeniable. Yet, there is also a quiet exhaustion, a persistent undercurrent of unease. You may feel the need to constantly push, even when your body or mind signal rest. When you attempt to pause, you notice the tension, the guilt, the subtle insistence that you should be doing something more. Even leisure can feel provisional, as though it must be earned. And this is where hypervigilance and early adaptive strategies converge. The nervous system that once responded to external uncertainty now responds to internalized pressure. Every moment of inaction is subtly interpreted as risk. Every break is a small threat. What if something goes wrong? What if I am judged? What if I am not enough? These are the echoes of childhood survival mechanisms, replaying silently, persistently, in adulthood. It is not unusual for people in this pattern to tie their self-worth to achievement. The habit of self-discipline, learned as a form of protection, becomes a measure of value. If you are productive, competent, and controlled, you feel worthy. If not, anxiety and guilt arise. The child who once used effort to survive now lives in an adult whose identity is intertwined with performance. There is little room for error, vulnerability, or genuine rest. Without realizing it, the act of self-discipline, which once created safety, now maintains a cycle of internal tension. You are constantly alert, constantly striving, constantly moving toward goals, both explicit and implicit. Even when you wish to relax, your mind and body resist. The nervous system remains primed, waiting for danger that may no longer exist, responding to signals inherited from a past environment. There is a deep quietness to this confinement. It is not dramatic or explosive. It is subtle, persistent, a whispered expectation rather than a shouted command. A quiet insistence that your worth is contingent, that your value is tied to your ability to manage, control, and perform. And because it is subtle, it can be nearly invisible to yourself, even as it shapes every decision you make. The consequences are both practical and emotional. Chronic tension, internalized stress, and subtle anxiety may be constants. Relationships may feel conditional, filtered through the lens of performance and control. Pleasure and rest may be limited or uneasy. And yet, the drive to persist, to excel, to maintain control, remains strong because it feels necessary. Because at one level, it is. It was necessary once, and the nervous system does not quickly forget what once kept it alive. And here is the quiet truth: it is not your fault. Not because you failed, not because you are flawed. The strategies that formed in childhood were adaptive, intelligent, and human. They were responses to a world that required vigilance, control, and careful attention. They were not mistakes, they were survival mechanisms. What changes is context. The same strategies that once provided safety now operate in an environment where the dangers are often abstract, internal, or no longer present. The intensity that once served you now demands more than it gives. Self-discipline becomes both a shield and a weight, protecting you while also limiting your freedom to simply be. And yet, in recognizing this, a space opens. Awareness does not instantly dismantle the cage, but it softens its hold. Seeing that your patterns of self-discipline originated in care, caution, and survival allows you to witness them with compassion. There is relief in acknowledging that what constrains you now once saved you then. This is the paradox at the heart of self-discipline. It is at once protective and confining, nurturing and demanding. It is a tool of survival that has evolved into a measure of worth. And the first step toward gentle freedom is not to abandon discipline, but to understand it, to recognize its origins, and to see how it shapes your life. In that recognition lies the possibility of subtle release. Not a dramatic liberation, not a sudden transformation, but the quiet easing of tension. A slow exhale in a body that has been holding itself taut for years. A fleeting awareness that there is room for presence beyond performance, that you can exist without constantly proving yourself. And even in the softest of moments, that is enough. Part 5. Breaking free, finding balance. The more you come to understand the patterns that have defined you, the habits, the need for control, the drive to achieve, the more you begin to notice the spaces in between. You notice the quiet, the stillness, the places where you have been holding your breath, waiting for the next task, the next demand, the next thing to prove. And in these moments, you begin to ask yourself, what would it be like to just be? Breaking free from the cage of self-discipline is not a dramatic process. It's not about abandoning everything you've worked so hard for. It's not about rejecting the discipline that has shaped your achievements or protected you when you needed it most. Rather, it's about integration, about finding balance between the parts of you that drive forward and the parts that need to rest, to feel, to simply exist. Self-discipline has always been about control, and now, in the space you've created by understanding its origins, you have the chance to take that control into your own hands. Not to dominate, not to push harder, but to choose. To choose when it's time to strive and when it's time to release. The key to this lies in understanding that you do not have to be in control all the time. You don't need to keep pushing. You don't need to be constantly moving. The simple act of sitting still can be just as powerful as the act of pushing forward. There is a freedom in this realization, a quiet, soft freedom that comes not from abandoning the things that matter to you, but from accepting that you are more than the sum of your achievements. You are not just the tasks you complete, the work you do, or the progress you make. You are the person who has, over the years, learned to survive, to thrive, and to adapt. And now, you can learn to be, not in spite of self-discipline, but alongside it. Imagine, for a moment, what it would feel like to let go of the pressure, to stop constantly measuring your worth against what you do, to acknowledge that you have already done enough, and that you are enough. It's not about throwing away the lessons of discipline, but about softening your relationship with it. It's about seeing that, as valuable as self-discipline is, it does not have to be your constant companion. It does not need to define your every action or decision. There is room for quiet, for stillness, for ease. This is where balance comes in. Balance is not a rigid, linear state. It is the moment-to-moment awareness of what you need. It's knowing when to push forward and when to pause. It's recognizing that the act of achieving does not define you, and that the act of resting does not diminish you. Balance is the quiet awareness that you are worthy, not because of what you do, but simply because you exist. Self-discipline can remain with you, but no longer as a measure of your value or a constant source of stress. You can choose to embrace it as a tool, a gentle companion that supports your goals, without holding you hostage to them. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself. You can rest in the quiet understanding that you are enough, just as you are. And when you begin to rest, when you begin to feel the weight of control soften, you might notice something soft and gentle inside you. It's the part of you that was always there but was hidden beneath the layers of responsibility, of striving, of proving. It is the part of you that is simply human, that is allowed to feel, to falter, to be imperfect. This is the paradox of self-discipline. It is both a tool and a prison, both a savior and a constraint. But it is also an opportunity to choose how much space it occupies in your life, how much energy it takes from you, and how much freedom you allow yourself in return. In choosing to let go of the need to control all the time, you are not failing. You are, in fact, giving yourself permission to be whole, to acknowledge that rest, vulnerability, and imperfection are not weaknesses but integral parts of the human experience. In this space, you are allowed to be, to exist, without the constant drive to prove yourself, to chase achievement, or to meet someone else's expectations. The beauty of this is not in the absence of self-discipline, but in its recontextualization. It is no longer a cage, but a gentle structure that supports you without constraining you. You have the power to choose when to use it, when to let it go, and when to embrace the quiet, the stillness, and the beauty of simply being. And as you sit with that thought, as you breathe in the space that has opened up before you, you might just feel the quietest, most profound shift of all. Not a shift of action, but a shift of understanding, a quiet realization that you are enough, just as you are.